Good evening, everyone. I'd like to, first of all, apologize for the delay due to a previous meeting that was having our circuit, but we're all here, and I'm very pleased and happy to be chairing and moderating this panel. As is well known, Greece is now holding the presidency of the Council of Europe. And the Council of Europe is a cornerstone of European politics, and I would say of European political culture. This webinar today is going to be talking about female leadership in Europe. And at last, I have to say, it's nice to have a reverse situation. Usually we have a token women in panels in this country, awful. This time, I wouldn't say I'm the token man, but I'm the only man. And I think that's positive. I mean, change has to start somewhere. If you look at Europe right now, there's not a single parliament that has 50% or more women. And many countries are down to 10 or 20%. We look around the globe, how many women have the executive positions in governments. If we have close to 200 countries, it's usually less than 30 at any given moment. So on the one hand, we have substantial progress that has been made and is being made. And in many ways, Europe is on the forefront of this. On the other hand, it's pretty clear we're not where we should be, and it is a process. We begin today by welcoming Deputy Minister Sofia Zaharaki, Deputy Minister of Education, a field that is sorely tested by the pandemic. We realize and acknowledge that this is a tough day for you. So we're all the more grateful for making the time and addressing the issue of female leadership in Europe. Minister Zaharaki, the floor is yours.
Professor Jaberis, thank you very much for the warm introduction. And of course, yes, the acknowledgement that it is indeed a demanding day for us here at the Ministry of Education, as it was the first day that online learning was implemented for secondary education children. So imagine 600,000 children trying to access a platform that collapsed through to some European network not working. But anyway, this is something that we need to fix. And at the same time, I wouldn't by any means miss on the opportunity to address this very respectable panel of discussants, people, women that have a very important role to play. And I am really blessed that I am a part of this discussion group. So to each and everyone attending this panel discussion today, and you, of course, Professor, who has been known for giving opportunities also to women, not only at the faculty that you represented, but also during the sessions of the bachelor and the master degrees. I know that women there get leadership skills, and I have witnessed that as being a student of your university myself. But if I would like, let's say, to make an initial comment on the discussion point that we are raising today, is that we received some good news just the other days. I mean, just the other day, with reference to Kamala Harris and her success in being the first female vice president of the United States. I think that it was so inspirational to hear that I may be the first woman in this office, but I will not be the last. So every little girl that was watching, and as I'm quoting, I'm also rephrasing, every little girl that was watching that night, she saw a country of possibilities. And what I would like our country to become too is a country of possibilities. And we have the potential because we have amazing human resources. We have good studies, solid studies that accompany our graduates for many, many years. And of course, we can change the mentality. It takes longer, of course, it takes longer because we have some deeply rooted ideas, perceptions, or even prejudice, as I might call it. But let's see what we can do in order not only to describe, but also to place the importance that it deserves to the word women empowerment. I would like to start by giving you some numbers. I think that the numbers are indicative, and I would like to talk about my field, the field of education. I will definitely use the help of my notes here, and I apologize for this. Because when we talk about female professionals in the education sector, we are probably faced with slight disappointment. And let me give an example of why I might say that. Now, out of 3,466 heads of secondary education schools in high schools in Greece, only 38% are females. And maybe that could be encouraging compared to some other sectors. Things look much brighter in the primary schools because the heads of primary and elementary education schools in Greece are by 72% represented by women. But this is also justified because women tend to be more teachers for primary school education. That means for kindergarten and our children aged from 6 to 12. Now, when it comes to administration in the education hierarchy, figures reveal an even more disappointing reality. And I think that as we go up the scale in hierarchy, this will also be the trend. Now, we have 116 regional directorates, and out of them, only 25% of them are women. And things are even more disappointing when we reach the peripheral level. In the total of 13 directorates all around Greece, Greece is divided by 13 directorates, only 2 are run by women. So what can we do? Yes, the numbers can be discouraging, or they can be, at the least, let's say, definitely a basis for discussion. We can talk about education and we can feel its importance. How can we instill this leadership notion or this word of opportunities also in the education? By definitely trying to incorporate into the curriculum more, if I can say, more programs, or even encourage more, or even after school clubs that can help children role share, definitely be able to develop their skills. And I'm not talking about the skills as we know them, but mostly talk about soft skills, the discussion, the opportunity to work together, the opportunity to take decisions, the opportunity to think outside the box. This has already been done on a pilot basis this year when we decided as the Greek Education Ministry to incorporate into the curriculum a notion of the skills lab. So we feel, but even by these means, by incorporating the sense of skills lab into the primary school, we can help children gain more empowerment. And of course, girls can be more empowered in order to feel that they can equally play the part. This is also accompanied by such an initiative in the secondary education. And what we also do is try to empower school children, especially at the end of junior high school, the age of 14, 15, in order to make more informed decisions, especially about their future, about the vocational path that they would like to follow, all the employment career prospects that they have. So by trying in such a way to help children make better decisions, work together as a team, and of course, gain more self-confidence, we can definitely help the girls who do academically really well, also to be able to take decisions. And this kind of mentality, this kind of mindset can definitely help them in the years to come. This is it's not going to happen by a magic wand, and we're not going to see the next term of heads of directors magically reach the 50%. But the more they see also women take a stand beyond the leadership, let's say, stand, they can also be inspired in order to apply, because sometimes they don't even apply. But Maria Sirengela is here and she will definitely talk about all the facilitating measures that her directorate is taking. This cannot be implemented if we cannot help women with their family life, because sometimes these impediments really confine women from applying, because we need to get them to apply. This is the first step in order to become heads of schools or heads of directorates. So the more measures we take in order to help the children stay longer at school by all-day school, to help children access all-day school, as we did. We removed all barriers from applying in the all-day school, to help the children be aided, as Maria has already introduced the notion of the daycare help, nanny at home, if I'm not mistaken. Mary will talk about this and she will elaborate on that. This will help us to balance family and work life and better help access for women into the first step, which is to apply. And when they apply, the more they apply, the more percentage we will see represented at the school level, the directorate level, or the regional directorate level. And that was my initial comment, Professor.
Mr. Zaharaki, thank you very much. There are two things that I take out of your presentation. One is, I think you very passionately and wisely said that you got to start, at the beginning, with primary education. Attitudes do not change unless they're changed gradually from the very beginning. And it's so important. I'm very proud that you have reintroduced vocational education, no doubt in a way that demonstrates that girls are not to be excluded from certain professions. So I think that is very important. My second major takeaway is you very eloquently said there's no magic wand. You actually warned us. This is a process. It's a struggle, and it's a long-term process and struggle. So we got to keep moving towards the right direction, but knowing that there are no quick fixes or magic bullets. Now, I will ask everyone one question, and the question to Mrs. Zaharaki is the following. So let us assume that we can give you that magic wand, and you can change one thing. You have, since we have priorities and hierarchies of goals, you can magically change one thing in the educational or vocational system. What would that be? What would be the top priority?
Professor, as regards female representation or in general?
I think we will stick to female representation.
So I would definitely
help that.
Yes, I would definitely wish, if it were for that magic wand to be, I would definitely wish for more heads of directorates regionally. So we raise this 28% by at least, reaching the 50% of the representation. And I would like to have more girls in the heads of the school councils. And I talk about secondary education, because it is through that they gain the self-confidence in order to step up, talk publicly. And you know that public speaking is always such a tenuous task for everyone. It's a trying thing. And by this means, they can develop the leadership skills, definitely be able to manage with people and different demands and different, in opposing sides. So if I were to take my two magic wand wishes, these would be the ones.
Mr. Zaharaki, thank you very much. I think it's very helpful that you pinpointed specific things that can and should and hopefully will change. Once again, thank you very much for making time in what is, I'm sure, an impossibly busy day. So thank you very much. We now turn to Ms. Rosa Bjork Brynjolfsdóttir. I hope I pronounced the last name well enough or close enough. And she's from the delegation of Iceland to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Thank you very much for joining us. It is very important to have you on our panel, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you to discuss this important issue, and great to have the opportunity to speak to you here from Reykjavik, Iceland. When it comes to gender equality, Scandinavia is often praised for leading the way towards greater equality between women and men in different fields. Historically, the Nordic countries consisting of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Iceland were indeed the vanguard of representing women in political institutions. And to this day, most of the Nordic countries continue to dominate rankings on gender equality. As of 2020, Iceland, Norway, Finland, and Sweden were leading the Global Gender Gap Index, an index which takes national gender gaps in political, economic, educational, and health-based criteria into consideration. While the Nordic countries generally perform well when measuring gender equality in politics, They differ on some interesting touch points, and in March 2020, 4 out of 5 prime ministers in Nordic countries were women. But Sweden remained the only country which has never led by a woman as a prime minister, despite having had a very good record in gender equality. However, Sweden ranked second after Finland when it came to having the largest share of females in the parliament, while Iceland and Denmark reached less than 40% each, a number that shrunk down here in Iceland for about 10% in last parliamentary election in 2017, from close to 48% in 2016 to 38% in the year after in an election in 2017. And that lowering of about 10% of female members of the parliament was gave us, a female politician and feminist activists, quite a shock. But what is it about Iceland, and why does it achieve such a good place when it comes to gender index? We ask ourselves often that question, and historically and culturally, women in Iceland have always played an important role in our society, just as women in all societies. But as fishermen and farmer societies throughout the centuries, women shouldered the responsibilities equally to men, and even more when the fishermen had to take out the sea in all kinds of weather. Harsh and cruel nature also meant that all people had to be on board in a constant struggle with the nature forces. And we also have a religious explanation to the strong position of women in our society as well. But by 1975, if we jump a little bit ahead of us in the history, Icelandic women were fed up. It wasn't just that they weren't being properly paid for the labor, they were also sick of the lack of their political representation. Only 9 women had ever won seats in parliament at that time, since 1915. So against the backdrop of the global feminist movement at the time, Iceland's women decided to take things into their own hands, then took to the streets, and which was an all-known form of activism at the time. Women had been taking to the streets in New York and in UK. But what made Iceland Day of Protest on 24th of October 1975 so effective was the number of women who participated. 1/5 of the female population went out to the streets, 25,000 women at the time. And all other women that didn't go out on the street at the time, they striked at home in their professional or domestic strike. Teachers, nurses, office workers, housewives, they put down tools and didn't go to work, provide childcare, or even cook in their kitchen. So there was a movement that was enormously important for us. And of course, as you all know, the role models are of great importance. The election of the first woman, Mrs. Vigdís Finnbogadóttir, as a democratic elected head of any state in the world in 1980 had never occurred without this Women's Day in 1975. She has stated that several times. Other landmarks soon followed. An all-female political party, Women's Alliance, was established, and that resulted in more women elected to parliament. By 1999, more than 1/3 of the members of the parliament were women here in Iceland. And then in the year 2000, parental leave legislation came into effect and is a transformative act of contribution to the equality of genders. But we Icelandic women, we still have a lot of obstacles on our way. We still have less economic power than men. Only 20% of managers are women. Only 30% of experts and owners of TV are women. And women still earn around 12 to 14% less than men. And of course, as everywhere else, we had our share of sexual harassment that the Me Too movement showed us. And the biggest threat that still faces women in Iceland and girls is the scale of domestic violence and sexual violence, and the justice system that has not developed in accordance to that. Gender progress doesn't come about in a vacuum, and grassroots pressure plus investments in politics is a very powerful catalyst for change. And the most efficient investment in politics here in Iceland have been implementing quota system for the politics and for the political parties, for the board of businesses, for the institution, etc. And also the educational part, as mentioned here earlier, is a vital part as well. Although we, the Icelandic women and the women's movement, thought that as soon as more women in Iceland were more educated, we would gain our rights, but that did not happen quite as easily and smoothly as we thought. But educating young boys as well about the gender equality is a vital thing as well, and we have to include them. And there are now 21 high schools in Iceland who are teaching children from the age of 16 to 19 gender equality as a part of their curriculum. And that has been also a very vital part in upbringing new generations. But just to close this, women's rights has never been given to women. They have had to fight for them. And gender equality does not come about of its own accord. Intricate collective action and solidarity of women human rights defenders, political will, and tools as legislation and gender budgeting and quotas are the key words here. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think that Ms. Björnsdóttir told us three things. So I have three major takeaways from your presentation. One is it's a presentation perhaps from the future as far as Greece is concerned. You come from a country that's at the very peak of the global gender gap index, and so much has been achieved. So in many ways, we look up to your achievements, and this is very important. The second takeaway, which you stressed, is that sure, we're leading the world in many ways, but this was not handed to us. It didn't just happen. It was the result of struggle. It was the result of policies. And you also pointed out that there's no guarantee that positive trends will continue. We might see pushback as well. The third thing is that you also highlighted not just activism, but specific policies. And you mentioned parental leave legislation and quotas, which might be a little bit more controversial, but seem to have produced results. So my one question is, based on your experience from this very successful country in terms of gender equality, if you could recommend to people here in Greece one major policy change or area where work has to be done, which one would it be?
I would say, well, it's easy to pick one area, but I would say the parental leave and also the gender budgeting, if you're talking about the policy making. That I said that the parental leave has been a major tool for women and for parenting responsibility, and has resulted in many ways in the participation and understanding of fathers as well on the quality of upbringing our children. Gender budgeting as well has been a very vital tool in the policy making, whereas we always have to have this, look at all the budgeting throughout the gender perspective. That is healthy and good and necessary for us, because this is the money of us all, not only the money of some particular groups.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting and helpful. So we now turn to Maria Sirangela, who's the Secretary General for Equality and is a powerhouse for change and initiatives and policies. So I'm very interested to listen to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Now I think that you can hear me. Thank you very much for the invitation. I am really very happy that Mrs. Björk just said the two things that we are gonna now having in the next period. The first one is the paternity leave. This is something that we are going to vote. We are going to introduce a new law in the next 1 or 2 months in the Greek Parliament for the paternity leave, because in Greece now we have only 2 days for the fathers when a new when a new kid comes to the block, and now we will have at least 14 days, and this is not only an obligation from for the father, it's only a right for the father to have time to with his kids. And the second one is gender budgeting. In cooperation with OECD, we are going to have a program for the central government on how we can make the gender budget in the central government especially. First of all, I would like also to congratulate Women Act and the Council of Europe, and especially the Greek presidency. And of course, we all know that the times we are going through are full of new limitation, but they are also full of new challenges. It is also a very useful period for all of us, for reports, for evaluations. And maybe we are in our homes, not only here in Greece, but all over Europe, but we do not remain motionless and inactive. We evaluate life to date and its achievements, and we have to review also practices that have led us into this crisis and prepare for a more productive new era. The present period seems to conceive a new world, and this is something that women must reassert our position and get what belongs to us and what we deserve. First of all, I would like to say that, as Mrs. Zacharaki already said, one of the big problems that we have here in Greece is the work-life balance, especially for women. And now we are going in the early 2021. We are going to have a program called Nannies of the Neighborhood, and this is something that it is something that I had when I was with two little kids at home. It was a very big problem for me to come back to the labor force. And many women of my generation in the past, especially in the province and in the rural areas, when they had a kid, for 2 years, they said that they would abandon their work, their job, and the majority of them, unfortunately, never came back to the labor force. And this is one of the programs we are going to launch in the early 2021. It will be pilot at first in some areas over Greece, and especially in the areas that we don't have kindergartens in the province and in the rural areas. And then we are going to have this program all over Greece. So let's come now to the politics. We, however, inequality, we all know that manifests at all levels of politics. And this is because there is a still strong resistance to female leadership. For example, no female leader or candidate leader has avoided the question of how she manages to combine the heavy role of a mother with that of a leader. And it is today, it is a precursor to whether a woman is considered capable of taking a position of responsibility if she has children, and how she can do so. And honestly, I have not heard in any interview of a male politician, both in Greece and in Europe, how he can combine fatherhood with leadership, because fatherhood is also very important as motherhood. I therefore insist that there is still very strong resistance to female leadership. Women make up half of the world population, but proportionately, they govern only 6 or 7% of the states. And of course, the number has improved over the last decade, but it's still very, very, very limited. The Nordic countries, for example, are an example of female leadership. We have many women politicians in high-level positions in Norway, in Denmark, in Finland, in Iceland for the last 20 years. And how can this be explained? In these countries, women are more financially independent. so their ability to access politics or leadership is greater. In countries with economical dependent or economical weak of women, female leadership is a distant dream. Because before breaking any glass roof or any glass ceiling, they have to overcome dozens of objective obstacles. Women candidates for a position must work hard and become extremely resilient to achieve their goal. And I have previously referred to resistance to female leadership, and I will bring you another example. When a woman leader behaves in a dominant way, she is rejected as being arrogant. And when a man behaves similarly, he is praised as strong. When a woman leader is moved, she is characterized as weak, without control of emotions. When a man is moved, he is characterized as the human with good contact with reality. Angela Merkel, for example, who is one of the most famous female politicians, has spent her political career trying to put aside her gender. She has said that when she once attended a meeting as Minister of Environment, she realized that people around her were paying more attention to what she was wearing than what she was saying. And of course, leadership is inspiration and not gender. It is planning, it is organization, it is communication, it is efficiency, it is an example. And that is everything that characterizes of us in our daily life, in our social and professional space. In this age of upheaval, women must not stay behind in the hierarchy of institutions and markets that are set to be established and involved in the future. Because today we had positions that are threatened by automation, and for this reason we have to guide young girls, to guide girls and women, and to direct them to the STEM sciences. What is need to change the way we live, that we think that we have to change the way we trade, and with what characteristics we have to do that. We focus on the result and we communicate the vision. And the European way, our way, give us the framework, give us the institutions, give us the tools. It also give us the models right now. We give us the model of Lagarde, of von der Leyen, of Sakelloropoulou here in Greece. And of course, it is up to each of us to convince, not without struggle, of course, not without anxieties, of course, but what we have achieved in the past or so far without cursing. Thank you very much.
Ms. Secretary General, thank you very much for your passionate presentation. I have 4 major takeaways. One is, usually we do a lot of, and I'm a professor, so I'm used to it, a lot of big rhetorical pronouncements or philosophical disquisitions, which is fine, and there's a place for that. But I very much like the fact that you have a very specific, practical orientation. So we can talk in general, but you're talking nannies for neighborhood or parenting programs. I can give you a personal example. For the first time in my department a couple of years ago, I was chairing it. A colleague of mine asked for leave of absence. He was a man. And we had to, it was the first time we had such a request. I had to find out what the law says. And the law was not very, it was actually an example of inequality. So I'm very pleased that you're working on this. The second thing that you said, and it's a major takeaway, is essentially you described the second shift in feminist literature that women have. They have to go to work and then they have to go home, and there's a second shift of things that are required of them to do. And that balance is sometimes just too much for any person, and that women tend to then choose the home, and then it's hard to go back to work. This is a real problem that has to be identified. And then you were very eloquent and, alas, very correct when you said that attitudes got to change, because we're facing double standards, the same behavior and different conclusions based on gender, which is unfortunate, but it's also very true. And we see how successful women have tried, successful in terms of leadership positions, have tried to deal and push back with this reality. Finally, and I think this is a theme that is emerging from our webinar today, is you talked about models. It's one thing to say women should be in positions of leadership. It's another to have women in positions of leadership, giving the example, serving as role models for young girls who will move up in this world. I have one quick question, and since from your position of authority, have you seen any positive or most likely negative consequences to equality and gender issues because of the pandemic? How has the pandemic influenced your work? Let's put it this way.
Unfortunately, COVID really hit women, and hit women in the workforce, in the labor force. And this is something now that we are going to have a research about what is happening exactly in our country, because we know that this is something that comes all over the world. Women all over the world had the problem. One of the problems that made women more unproductive in this period of COVID is domestic violence. For these reasons, we have the counseling centers, and now we are going to launch another campaign for the domestic violence. And the statistics that we have from all the counseling centers and the shelters are that high educated women with no job that are unemployed are the majority of the women that had domestic violence. Of course, they are those who can more easily to say about what they happen to them. But at the same time, we are in with cooperation with OAEF, with the labor force. The labor force institution of the government to make programs for all these women coming from the counseling centers that had the domestic violence and are unemployed. At the same time, as you already said, we are going to have practical solution and not only words, because in the past we had many things heard about what we have to do, but there were not the exact programs coming from all the ministries for women. And now having in our plan, the strategic plan of the Council of Europe and of the European Commission, the strategic plan for gender equality issues, we have 5 targets. And first one is, of course, domestic violence. And the second one is work-life balance, that we are going to launch this program of nannies of the neighborhood. The third is women in high-level positions that we are going to have with Women Act, and we are going to have the problem with women in cooperation with Women Act. And the fourth one is women in STEM and girls in STEM. And the fifth one is the enhancement of and the improvement of women employment. In Greece, we have a big amount of women unemployed. So this is one of the problems that we leave the half of our population outside of the workforce, and this is something that we have to change with all these programs.
Thank you very much. We now turn to Ms. Ksenia Kasoli, who's the co-founder of Corporate Governance Hub. And it has to be said, we're talking about leadership positions. It's not just politics, it's also business. And the floor is all yours, and we'll be talking about this in a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is both a pleasure and an honor to be here today, this panel with you. Before I share my thoughts on women in senior decision-making positions in Greece in the private sector, where I practice myself, I would like to share some indicative numbers just to give a little bit of context to what I'm about to say. As we heard from General Secretary Sirangela, women worldwide make 50% of the global population, yet they contribute only 37% in global GDP. In Greece, we also heard that there is a much lower penetration of women in the labor force. The Greek average, about 45%, is much less than the European average of 65%. What does it mean? That of course, if less women enter the labor force, then it's not to wonder why later on you cannot see them and find them in the higher ranks of a company, because they are just not there. A third number that does not do pride, I would say, globally, is that still today, 1 out of 5 board of directors in listed companies consist exclusively of men. This is a big number. And even in G20 countries, the numbers are, it's a dismay to listen to the numbers. It's about 17% of boards are women and 12% only in executive committees. So when you go to the executive structure, it's even less. So why does it matter? I mean, I'm not going to argue with this because I think it's now established. We all know there have been studies for long years that there is a positive correlation between the presence of women in senior positions and performance. Performance is the key. And why is that? I don't think anyone is preaching for a matriarchy corporate world. What we're saying is that, and which has been established in both qualitative and quantitative KPIs, that the women presence brings to the table complementary skills to men. So we're not saying that we want to see just women in commerce. We just want to say that we want to see women and men, because they have a very different leadership style. They have very different leadership behaviors, which in parallel, if they complement, they bring balance to other leadership behaviors from men, they account for the success of the company. I would say also that it matters because in societies where there is an aging population, like it is in Greece, you cannot really exclude this pool of untapped labor force, which later on is going to bring you the talent that you probably wouldn't have. How do we get there? I don't think it's rocket science, but it's easier said than done, you'll tell me. It basically, gender equality at work reflects gender equality in society, and we heard that. What could be done to facilitate this path in the private sector as well? Well, for a start, I'm also a firm believer of what we heard. We must have role models, and the state should set the example, and I think the state is already doing this, if I judge from the very competent ladies that we have in this panel. So, the state should continue to setting this example in the public administration. In the private sector, I wouldn't like to repeat what we heard before, but I think much of it is applicable to the private sector. So one has to look very carefully and identify all the obstacles and then remove them from the path to the top. Meaning you have to look very carefully at labor laws, at flexible work arrangements. In Greece, it's not by surprise that we have a lot of family businesses which are very successful, family businesses which are run by women, which is in their family, and maybe flexibility is the answer there why we have such success in these companies. We should look also at the regulatory framework. We should make sure that we have adequate laws for sexual harassment. We should make sure that there are equality gender pay protection. And last but not least, I should say that all our efforts should be collective and coordinated. Let me say on this that Greece has recently enacted a law in July, where for the first time it has been legislated a 25% quota of the lesser represented gender in board of directors. This has come amidst a decade-long discussion in the EU, where the EU now, it looks, is orientated towards a 40% quota. Few countries have already legislated that. I think Iceland is one of them. It has done that back in 2010, as it is in the avant-garde together with the Nordic countries of this gender gap. France has followed. So although myself, I'm not a big fan of quota in general, I would say that this 10-year period has shown that indeed there is a positive correlation between setting the quota and by law and obtaining some results. So is this provision of 25% enough for Greece? My answer is probably no. If it stays as it is, as a provision of the law, it should not be viewed as a quick fix. It should be followed by monitoring and assessing the process that is going to be applied, by measuring the short-term and the long-term consequences in directors and companies in the society, because not all societies are the same. It should be seen whether this can be expanded to a larger quota over the years, whether this could be expanded to covering, management structures as well. So I would say on that, before I close, that I think every little stone counts in this effort. That's why I have co-founded together with my fellow lawyer, Angelica Gusco, Corporate Governance Hub, which focuses on governance and gender and lobbying and training for diverse boards. So I would say that it's still a work in progress. We're still far from perfect. We're still far from parity, but I feel lucky enough to be born in this part of the planet where at least female leadership and diversity is on the table as an issue, and where it's definitely gaining momentum in Europe. I think it's up to all of us not to waste this momentum, and I'm pretty sure we will get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Casori. Three major takeaways from what you said. The first is another theme that is emerging from our webinar today, and that is you got to start at the beginning. If not enough women enter the workforce, then inevitably you're not going to have, no matter what, enough women in top positions. So we got to start from the first steps, from the very beginning, and encourage women to enter the labor force. The second example and major takeaway that is fascinating, and I agree with you, is that on the one hand, women do complement leadership styles. They bring a certain balance. I think that can be seen in practice and can be explained from in various ways. So that is very important. But also, it's an immense luxury for a country facing a demographic problem to say, okay, we can just ignore half of the population and we'll just move ahead as we did in the past. You can't really do that. It's shooting yourself in the foot, in addition to not having an equal society. And the third thing is, again, models. This is something that is very much in our webinar, present in our webinar today. But we're now entering a little more of a more sophisticated distinction between the private sector and the public sector. The public sector, there is an advantage where you can actually, if you're in position of power, appoint women. In the private sector, you can't just appoint women. It has to be a struggle. And you talked about how quotas have actually helped, even though you have ambivalent feelings about it. And this is my question. I'd like you to focus a little bit more on the quota thing. It's controversial. I hear this often in private, which is an indication that it might be simmering. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your ambivalence and what the way forward should be, in your opinion.
I'm glad I'm not the only ambivalent, because I think, legislators in different countries and in Europe have been discussing this over, as I said, over a decade. So that probably shows that, it is an issue to be discussed. As I said, I find that, I'm more of a free marketeer, and I feel that, if there are competent women, they will make it. But unfortunately, I have noticed that, this quota gives the little extra push that you need, at least to start with. I would say I personally would like to have seen in the Greek law more than 25%. If we were to go for a quota, let's make it a real quota, let's make it a 40%, and but I would give, a phasing in period. I would not like to say that as of next July that the law comes into force, because as of next July, every board in Greece has to come up with 1/4 of women members on the board. If you don't have these women in the pipeline, you may end up, to kind of like an opposite result. So I think all this has to be taken into consideration. As I said, I think in countries where, this is kind of like the first time that it goes on the table, it gives a push. Later on, in more mature societies, maybe by soft law, you can get there. But I'm not, how to say, I'm a pragmatist, and I see what studies and research have shown in Iceland, in Norway, in France, that in these 10 years, there has been success. Maybe at the beginning, there was a little bit, kind of like a little bit more by force, but that means that has forced every level to come up with these competent women in the pipeline and help promoting them. But I don't think this can be done, as also Mrs. Bjork said, this cannot be done overnight, and this cannot be done with a magic wand. We have to build it. That's why we need Deputy Minister Zaharaki here. That's why we need the General Secretary Sirangela. And that's why I said at the end, it's very important to have these collective coordinated efforts where we all work together towards the same goal.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. The webinar is of a very high level. And we now turn to Ms. Maria Jañú, who is an empowerment and leadership coach. The floor is all yours.
Now I'm unmuted. Thank you, Aris. Thank you so much. I'm also co-founder of Women Act, and with this quality, I'm talking to you here today. So the events of 2020 have turned the workplace upside down, okay? So under these challenging circumstances of the COVID-19 crisis, there are many employees that are struggling to do their jobs correctly. And this is what I see with my clients, for example. Many feel like they're always on, now that the boundaries between work and home have blurred a little bit. So they're worried about their personal health, their family's health, their finances, and there is a high risk of burnout. So women in particular have been negatively impacted by COVID. Statistics show that women are more likely to have been laid off or furloughed during the COVID-19 crisis, stalling their careers and jeopardizing their financial security. So the pandemic has also intensified challenges that women already face in the workplace, and many of our speakers have already mentioned them, like, for example, working mothers. They have always worked a double shift. So they have the full day of work at the office from 9 to 5, which is followed by hours spent caring for children and doing household labor. So now with the COVID crisis, the supports that made this even possible for women have been appended. And I'm referring to schools being closing down and childcare, which is no longer easily available. For example, in Greece, there is a whole system of family care based and depending on grandparents. And now we are not able to, use our grandparents to child care facilities. So as a result of these dynamics, a recent research of McKinsey for Linen revealed that 1 in 4 women are contemplating what many would have considered unthinkable less than a year ago, which is downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce. So this is a potential challenge for women in Greece as well. If you see the latest index for gender equality of the European Union revealed that gender gap in employment in Greece remains extremely high, particularly among couples with children. There is a high percentage of 45% of mothers who are unemployed. Let me just say here that with 52.2 out of 100 points, Greece ranks last in the EU on the Gender Equality Index, which is really sad. So this is the number 1 challenge. There is a number 2 challenge. So this last years, we're talking about breaking the glass ceiling, right? And about how important it is for women to be encouraged to pursue leadership positions. I would like to bring your attention to another major issue, which is complementary to the glass ceiling challenge, that of the broken rung in promotions. What I mean is that at the entry level, the percentages of men and women are more or less similar. But as their careers advance, we see less women being promoted. So the broken rung has a long-term impact on the talent pipeline, and Ms. Casoli referred to that. Since men significantly outnumber women at the manager level, there are far fewer women to hire or to promote to senior manager positions. And the number of women decreases at every subsequent level. So even as hiring or promotion rates improve for women at senior levels, women as a whole can never catch up. There are simply too few women to advance. So we need to face these 2 challenges, I think major challenges. On the one hand, the risk of women downshifting their careers, and on the other hand, the necessity to equally promote men and women alike. So as we can all imagine, these challenges are even more greater as a result of the COVID crisis. So the question is, what do we do about it? So let me give you a couple of ideas for the companies. First, what the companies could do is that they could reset the norms around flexibility that could help employees, especially women, to draw clear lines between work and home. I think this is a major issue now with remote working conditions. Like, companies should reestablish work-life boundaries in a very clear-cut way. At the same time, they could take steps to minimize gender bias by talking more, communicating more, training more. For example, how do we react when judgmental comments are made about, young children playing in the background on video calls? I mean, it has happened to all of us, right? Or how do we react when co-workers assume consciously or unconsciously, which is even worse, that women are less committed to do their job now that they are working from home and that they have like a tons of other things to do, like taking care of their children, etc. So this is a couple of ideas about the corporate environment. Second, how about institutions? We have the governmental institutions that I think have a double role. First, by putting in place programs that support both men and women in the workplace. We heard from the General Secretary, Cyril Gela, the number of initiatives that are going on right now, which is a very positive outcome. And secondly, what institutions can do and must do is that they have the capacity to sensitize and inform public opinion, which to my belief is the major challenge. And it is an ongoing challenge in order to fight stereotypes. So hopefully, if we see this from a global perspective, like if we propose a comprehensive solution, both from the corporate environment and from the public environment, then we might see Greece's EU Gender Equality Index doing better next year with more women leaders across sectors. Thank you, Addis.
Thank you very much. I have three takeaways and one question. The major takeaways is, first of all, the pandemic has made things worse because a lot of women are thinking of either going part-time, working less, or exiting the labor force, which is the last thing that we need, and it's going to compound all the problems that have been mentioned today. Second takeaway is that there's a real problem with promoting women, not just because you have fewer women, but because when it comes time to promote the women you have, there seem to be certain biases at work, which is a real problem. And then you also offered some hope in the sense that a more balanced work home situation can be helped because now a lot more work is done remotely. So that might be able to provide some flexibility. And you can also work with institutions. But here's my question. When it comes to, say, promotions or taking all these positive decisions, the fact is that they have to be taken by men because they constitute the majority, the grand majority. How do you persuade men to promote women? Do you shame them? Do you force quotas down their throats? Do you educate them? How do you go about doing this? Is my question.
Well, this is the eternal question, I think, Addis. You're correct. I mean, men have the power, men take the decisions, and this is why we talked about gender mainstreaming as well, I think the only safe step to take in order to, create an environment where women can be considered as equal to men, as they really are, is to train men and women, but mostly men from a very young age about fighting, recognizing first, and then fighting stereotyping. You know that I have a 7-year-old son. When he was 3 years old, he went to school. So before going to school, we never talked about this is for girls, this is for boys, this should be blue, this should be pink. So after 1 month at school, we were playing with Playmobiles, and he said, okay, Mom, let's play with my pirate ship. And I said, yes, let's play with my pirate ship. And he said, this is your Playmobil. And he gave me a lady Playmobil, and this is my Playmobil. And he got a male Playmobil. So he said, what do you want to be, Mom? And I said, I'm going to be the captain of the ship. And he said, no, Mommy, women are never the captains of ships. So
Oh,
it was,
wow.
shocked, because I thought, I was raising a gender and free kid, but, stereotyping is so present in our everyday lives, and it's impossible to get rid of it if we don't pay attention, if we don't consciously realize the stereotypes that we promote, we as women, and then men as men. So I think it has to start from a really young age. And this is where the ministry has to come in with programs from the very, very, very young age of children about, recognizing stereotyping and ways to fight stereotyping. And then we will get to the era where men won't have biases when deciding who to promote, a man or a woman. They will just look at the credentials and say who's good for the job, as simple as that. But it will take a long time, of course.
Thank you very much. We now turn to Ms. Nefeli Ligeru, the accomplished journalist from Protothema. The floor is all yours. You got to,
Okay.
okay, we can hear you now. You were muted.
Okay, I'm very pleased and honored to be with you today. It is truly a pleasure to stand amongst these distinguished women. I would also like to extend my warm welcome to Mr. Diabiris. If I had to sum up my thoughts on this very complex matter, I would use the phrase, progress is here and progress is clear. Is this enough? No, because progress is slow and uneven. Let me elaborate. But first thing first, we are here to talk about Europe and women in leadership. Please forgive me, since I cannot ignore Kamala Harris' achievement. Progress is progress wherever it occurs. Her election will serve as a source of hope for many young women in Europe too. Harris makes history as the first woman and woman of color who is elected vice president. Miss Harris, the daughter of an Indian mother and Jamaican father, has risen higher in the country's leadership than any woman ever before. The fact that more women are willing to run for office is a positive step. A recent study showed that women represented by a woman are more interested and become more involved in politics and feel more skilled and effective than did those represented by a man. Let's return to us. During the last 2 years, 2019, 2020, we are witnessing a higher than ever level of female political leadership in Europe. From the election of 4 female head of state to the female presidencies of 2 European institutions. We saw the first female president of Slovakia, Danish prime minister, high court judge and human rights advocate Katerina Sarkelaropoulou. Our Katerina has been elected Greece's first female president. Equally significant is the success of Ursula von der Leyen, Christine Lagarde. It's important, to recognize all these women and many more, all women who participate in public and political life. Female empowerment must also consider women's access and mobilization within formal and informal political spaces. Each and every one of them makes of a milestone. All of them challenge the male-dominated status quo in politics. Europe has come a long way on the issue. All the cases above break 70 years of male leadership in the EU and mark a significant step forward in bringing gender parity to European politics. Because gender equality is one of its core values, and equal participation in decision-making is a matter of justice, of respect for fundamental rights, and good governance. We are witnessing progress. There is no doubt about that. And I would like to note that internet plays an important role in this progress, not only in awareness, but also in helping women candidates run for office, promoting their causes by, reaching a wider audience. Youth are also a very important part of promoting women in public and political life because they lead social change around the world. However, we have such a long road ahead. In 2020, fewer than 15% of the 27 EU countries' heads of government were female. And this reflects the fact that women are still largely excluded from the executive branches of government and senior positions. Surveys show that the majority of Europeans believe that women are underrepresented. Gender quotas have helped women to break this, mold and make political inroads. However, women's empowerment should not stop there. It's important to note that between 2014 and 2016, EU allocated 5 million to 23 projects to improve the gender balance at all management levels. The 2020-2025 strategy is continuing along the same track. That is a very positive development. This is why we must have this kind of conversations but focus on the obstacles female leaders face and perhaps female political leaders. Social science research has identified a likability penalty. While male leaders are rewarded for being strong, assertive, directive, women are judged on their likability. Other research shows that women may actually be penalized in higher executive assessment and promotion for being smart. In fact, serious social science research have studied the gender penalty in leadership for decades. Women face distinctive social penalties for doing the very things that lead to success. They may be applauded for delivering results at work, but at the same time, they're criticized for being too aggressive, difficult, abrasive. But on a positive note, there are still many firsts to come. Let's fight for every one of them. Thank you for your time and your patience.
Thank you very much. There are three things that I take from what you said. One is you almost went philosophical about the concept of progress. It's here, it's slow, it's uneven, it's everywhere, and you'll take it wherever it comes from. So that's very interesting. The second is you gave very specific examples of how the male-dominated politics of the executive sector in Europe and the European Union have seen a decrease and progress has been made, but at the same time, it's already absolutely clear that this progress is not enough. It's positive and very specific examples of high-profile women who have been elected or appointed to top jobs. That makes a positive difference, as does the fact that Greece, for the first time in 200 years, has a female president. And that's also something to be noted. It took 2 centuries, but we finally, about 2 centuries, but we finally got there. And it was very interesting how you mentioned that the internet might be a tool that is actually bridging gender gaps. And I think that I'd like to think about that, and that's going to be my question. But you also gave some very specific examples. Another theme that has emerged today, the double standards when it comes to leadership for men and women. and you point out for women is, are they liked? For men, it's not about being liked, are they strong? Two different standards, which has real impact on how you actually move ahead, because leadership positions inevitably are public positions. And so how the public responds is very important. And I guess we'd like to go back to the drawing board and change society from the very beginning. My question is, this I found very fascinating. And since you're a journalist, you deal with this medium and social media all the time. Can you talk a little bit more about how either social media or the internet in general can actually be impacting gender roles and gender imbalances when it comes to leadership?
I think that social media, we criticize social media very often, but I think social media can change the stories of the world, so they can change the way we see female leadership. They can project positive stories, positive female characters, not only in politics, but in business, in media too. For example, I want to talk about my field because it's no surprise to women journalists or women working in media-related fields that leadership in media companies is lacking women at the top ranks. And I've seen women, professional women, go to social media to gain some of this power that they cannot have in, the mainstream media. So I think that we really need to follow very carefully social media, because they are the future and they can help, project very positive stories.
Thank you very much. We turn now, last but certainly not least, to May Zanih, who is co-founder and president of Women Act and an advisor to the Greek Prime Minister. Ms. Zanih, the floor is yours. Yes, you are.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, on behalf of Women Act, a big thank you to the Greek chairmanship of the Council of Europe. It's very important that gender equality has had an event previously, the session on local government, and also in October with the Secretariat for Gender Equality. Today is a good day to talk about gender equality, to talk about female leadership. Women all over the world have been rejoicing with the news that Kamala Harris is to be the next vice president in the US. But how well do we fare in Europe? When it comes to female leadership, this is directly linked to gender equality. And if we look at the latest data from the Gender Equality Index by the Institute for Gender Equality, the figures show that there's a very negative picture. It will take at least 60 years for the European Union to reach complete gender equality. Now, how well is Greece faring? We are in the last place. So here, let me add that the data is from 2018, not 2020. However, when it comes to balanced participation of both genders, the picture is bleak. For Europe, we're looking in the domain of power, the domain where we'll be discussing for female leadership, where we measure the engagement of women in decision-making in the areas of politics, economics, media, sports, in the public sphere. Here we may add that there's a serious threat posed by the coronavirus pandemic. As Maria Sirigella said, it poses new limitations and new challenges when it comes to gender equality. Therefore, we now need more than ever inclusive solutions, which will only come and be proposed by inclusive leaderships. We cannot afford to wait for 60 more years in Europe or elsewhere. Female leadership is key to this. We need, though, the public to be behind us, more public awareness, more support for it. And indeed, in Greece, we're looking at a public sphere which is heavily dominated by men. Women Act was launched in 2017 by 8 co-founders because of this. We believe that through our innovative programs on education, knowledge, and mentoring, we can change the situation. For example, right now we have a campaign which focuses on women visibility called No More Manels, in order to have more women on panels. Our main activities are our leadership academies, which give women the necessary tools, and also our monthly aperitifs, which provide networking and public speaking opportunities for all. However, nothing is superior to the power of example. As they say, if you can't see it, you can't be it. In the UK, when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, more girls than boys replied Prime Minister when asked what they want to be when they grow up. It's fascinating to see how the next generation reacts to figureheads, such as the 4 Prime Ministers of the Nordic countries mentioned earlier, such as the European Commission head, Ursula von der Leyen, and of course, Angela Merkel. We have many examples, but the fact is that gender equality has to be an important policy goal for intergovernmental organizations, and therefore it's important that the Council of Europe does so. Female leadership will only become the norm rather than the exception as a concrete result of gender equality being a priority for all. To this end, we strongly feel that we need more role models, more campaigns, more policies, more measures, more awareness raising to succeed. The public sphere in Europe could look very different in a few years as a result. And this will not just be a result, but it will also be the beginning of a new era. We at Women Act here in Greece are ready to play this role and hopefully acquire partners to do so abroad. And we would like you all to join us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ari, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I'd like to focus on your presentation. Thank you very much for it. There are 3 things that I want to focus on. One is the fact that you said it takes 60 more years. And when I heard that, my first reaction was, oh my gosh, 60 more years? I'm not going to be around by then, probably not. But then my second thought was, it's not 60 years, it's 3,060 years, because we are actually towards the end of a very, very historical long path towards gender equality. So 60 years might sound as a very long time, and in many ways it is, but it has to be contrasted to really world history. And in that sense, I think we are at a very good, historically speaking, spot. The second thing is that Greece is, or was in 2018, dead last in the gender equality index. I suspect that was partly the result of the crisis, the 10-year-old almost existential economic crisis that this country faced. But again, this sounds very bad. But on the other hand, and I'm the eternal optimist, but when you're last, there's only one way to go, and that's up and to improve things. And the third takeaway is the fact that we can talk about gender equality, we can talk about female leadership, but we got to do specific things. And you mentioned some of the initiatives, very specific, that Women Act is undertaking. No more manuals. I mean, this is a very good example of a panel that's not a manual, and I'm very happy to be here. Or leadership academies, things that make a difference. And I would actually, my one question to you is, from all the initiatives that Women Act is undertaking, which one do you think can grow more in order to have a larger impact?
Well, I would say that Women Act Champions is an initiative we'd like to grow more. Let me explain. We believe that men are part of the solution rather than the crisis. So we designate several men who believe in our cause to become champions and talk publicly about gender equality and all the issues surrounding it. I think that's something that we can take forward. And let me add here that we're very thankful that you are one of our champions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It's my honor. I have to be honest here. So this concludes our webinar, and it has been incredible. And here are the major themes that I'm taking home. Actually, I am home. I'm taking with me from this webinar. One is we need more role models. No ifs or buts about it. More role models will make a positive impact for gender equality and for having more women in leadership positions. Second, we got to start early. It's too late if we wait for people to be grown-ups. We have to go to secondary, primary education. We got to start from the beginning. Women have to enter the labor force. 3, no quick fixes. 60 years, so be it. It's a process. It's a struggle, and nothing is going to be given or should be taken for granted. It's really a struggle. It's a campaign, but it's worth it. And then you need to combat double standards. You can't have, when it comes to leadership, different standards based, or biases really, based on gender. That is completely unfair, unjust, and unacceptable. And finally, I'm very proud because this webinar actually gave so many examples. It's one thing to castigate or condemn a reality, but it's a whole different thing when you actually have to combat it. And that has to deal with specific policies, whether it's making work more flexible, giving parenting leave for men, issuing quotas for corporate boards, having leadership academies. In addition to having the examples of women who are successful, you need to have the policies and the internet and everything. So this is actually very helpful because it sort of like points the way to how we can maybe even shorten the 60-year wait into something more manageable and within our lifetimes. It has been a joy to moderate this. I've learned a lot and I'm still learning. And thank you very much for your time and your participation.